Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Keke Coutee, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 16 wide receiver rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're going to be covering all things related to the wide receiver position, beginning with wide receiver matchups. We'll talk about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. Then after we cover that, kind of give you guys an idea as of to what is the most advantageous or disadvantageous matchup going into this week. We'll cover my top 36 wide receiver rankings. Again, like we always say, rankings are subject to change, like it says up there. Again, rankings are subject to change because there are so many different circumstances taking place, different injuries that are popping up every single day. Luckily for us, the first game of the week does not start until Friday. Again, that is Friday. The Minnesota Vikings will be playing against the New Orleans Saints on Friday, which is really weird. Then we have 3 Saturday games and then Sunday and Monday. But either way, we're trying to capture a 2020 fantasy football championship. For those of you who play in a Week 16 championship, hopefully majority of you being the case, this is going to be an exciting week. Hopefully we'll gather all the information prior to Friday's and Saturday's games so that we'll be set and ready to go for this upcoming weekend. But either way, it's always subject to change. If you're trying to stay up to date on my latest rankings, we will be doing 2 live streams this weekend. We'll have one on Saturday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we'll have one on Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Kick off with Kirchhoff, answering questions, updated rankings, all of that jazz, helping you guys out. Hopefully we'll help you capture a championship this upcoming weekend. Outside of that, we'll also have Week 17 stuff the following week, so do not worry for those of you who play in a 2-week championship or your finals is next week, just so everybody's on the same page. Outside of that, I think we're ready to go. Again, I want to thank you guys for all the support. If you haven't yet already, click the subscribe button, click the like button on today's video. It really does help out a lot. Makes a huge difference in terms of being able to just get this channel going and expanding and growing more. And also be sure to comment down below. All right, let's get into this. Let's talk about matchups at the wide receiver position. Again, the wide receiver position, it's pretty much as consistent as can be. Every team is susceptible to giving up points. Some teams obviously have better secondaries, and some corners are always going to be able to lock down any opponent they face. But either way, we'll cover the most advantageous matchups for this upcoming week first and foremost. Talking about the Atlanta Falcons, of course, giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers. Just this past week, we saw Antonio Brown. We saw Chris Godwin both score a touchdown. We even saw Mike Evans in that contest go for over 100 receiving yards. I mean, it shouldn't really be a surprise. And the Atlanta Falcons, unfortunately, have to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. We know what their wide receivers are capable of. Tyreek Hill is going to be able to dominate in that contest. Now, the Seattle Seahawks, even though they are giving up technically the second most points, that's mainly because of the average over the first 15 games of the or the first 15 weeks of the season, the first 14 games. As it currently stands, I don't really see this as something that is that advantageous at this current moment. They haven't given up a receiving touchdown to an opposing wide receiver in the last 6 weeks. Obviously, Terry McLaurin wasn't able to do much with the 12 targets he had last week. In terms of a PPR format, sure, but in a half PPR, he only got himself upwards of 12 points. Again, it's tough for the wide receiver position. Now, we move on to Dallas Cowboys, of course, are giving up a lot of points. That'll be great for Jalen Hurts in the wide receiver core there, but I don't know if there's a singular wide receiver in the Philadelphia offense that I'm looking to focus on, pick up, and play this weekend, unless I'm playing in an extremely deep league. The Minnesota Vikings, of course, give up a lot of points. That'll be good for Drew Brees because, again, Drew Brees has been struggling. He did not play well against that Kansas City secondary. Hopefully, he can find his bearings this week, and without Michael Thomas, put up a good productive week with the wide receivers like Emmanuel Sanders. I know Traquan Smith dealing with injury as of late. Of course, we have the Tennessee Titans giving up a lot of points. That's great for, of course, Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers, and that wide receiver core with MVS and Lazard. We got the Detroit Lions who are giving up all the points to everyone at all times. They've given up, I think, at least 4 touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks in 3 out of the last 4 weeks. So again, the Detroit Lions defense just doesn't exist, and that's going to be tough for them as they take on Brady this week and that extremely talented wide receiver core in Tampa Bay. The New York Jets, of course, have been getting torched. That's great for Baker, as he has been the number 3 overall quarterback in fantasy in the last couple weeks. Obviously, with Baker getting on a hot streak, Higgins and, of course, Jarvis Landry have been able to take advantage of that and be great wide receivers in a fantasy capacity. But either way, these are obviously the best matchups of the week. Jacksonville, Houston, Tampa Bay, Las Vegas Raiders. These are teams that are giving up a ton of points to opposing wide receivers. Obviously, we want to go ahead and just quickly cover some of the tougher matchups at the wide receiver position. This week, the biggest question in my eyes is, do you play DK Metcalf? If you are in a championship week, can you afford to potentially sit him? Do you have enough viable options on your team? Do you have enough depth to be able to sit him against Ramsey? Because again, the last time you played against him, it was a tough matchup. The Los Angeles Rams secondary has been playing well all season long, and they haven't really been giving up a lot of big productive weeks. The last time I saw a wide receiver produce against them, at a great capacity. I guess it was DeAndre Hopkins and it may be Deebo Samuel, but that was just a month ago. So again, they have been pretty solid as of late. The Washington football team, of course, has been better as a defense, but against wide receivers, they give up a lot of points recently. Their averages have obviously helped them out for majority of the season, as early in the first quarter of the season, they were unstoppable in the second. Or Kansas City, of course, played well, but still can give up a lot of points. Matt Ryan should be able to do that with Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage. We got the Chicago Bears, who still gave up some good yardage to Justin Jefferson this past weekend regardless. The Patriots will be missing Stephon Gilmore. Without Gilly Lock and the reigning defensive MVP of the league, it's going to be tough for them to kind of lock down Josh Allen with John Brown coming back, of course. But either way, now that we've covered that, I want to go ahead. Let's get back into the actual bread and butter of the episode. We're talking about my top 36 wide receiver rankings for week 16 of the 2020 fantasy football season. If you made it this far and you haven't yet already, click the like button down below. It really does help out a lot. I really do appreciate it. Also, if you haven't checked it out, we have a Discord server that is public to the community. It is down in the description of the video. If you are not familiar with Discord, just go click the link. It's free. Pretty much we're just talking about all things fantasy football. There's a bunch of people always talking in there in a text chat and or voice chat, just talking it up, being able to help each other out in terms of setting lineups. I'm always in there trying to poke my head in as much as I possibly can to help you guys out. But either way, appreciate it. Let's get into the top 36 rankings, beginning off with our number one wide receiver on the week, a wide receiver that for many of us, last week he could have ended your season potentially with the terrible performance that Davante Adams had against the Carolina Panthers. Not scoring a touchdown could have been the one time that Davante Adams really messed up this season, because he has been on fire outside of that. He had been unstoppable, scoring consecutive touchdowns every single week, and unfortunately had a game in which 7 catches for 42 yards wasn't going to cut it. Even though he had 10 targets and a great opportunity, he wasn't able to complete a touchdown, with Aaron Rodgers only scoring 1 passing touchdown this past week. It wasn't in the cards for Davante Adams. But if you've managed to still survive with Davante Adams, this is a fantastic week. And one that, honestly could be a record-breaking week against the Tennessee Titans defense. Just recently, the Tennessee Titans have given up a bunch of points to number one wide receivers, specifically Marvin Jones Jr. this past week. 10 catches, 112 yards and a touchdown. Keelan Cole the week before, 7 catches, 67 and a touchdown. The Browns wide receiver core absolutely dominated against them 3 weeks back with 16 catches, 249 and 3 touchdowns. T.Y. Hilton, he started off his hot streak against the Tennessee Titans with 4 catches, 81 and a touchdown. Everybody that plays against this secondary succeeds. Everybody who plays against this defense succeeds at a capacity. And to be honest, Davante Adams, the sky's the limit with him. I think he'll get back on track, certainly because that is what he's certainly capable of. The averages show that he's more likely to score a touchdown or even 2 touchdowns than have another bad week. So again, we're locking him in as our number one this week. Our number 2 is Tyreek Hill. Again, we mentioned the Atlanta Falcons matchup being the best amongst all teams as of this week for the wide receiver position. And that certainly helps the other wide receivers on this Kansas City Chiefs team. Sammy Watkins, Mecole Hardman, Robinson. The question is, can those guys pull enough pressure to let Tyreek Hill eat? To be honest, regardless of what happens, Tyreek Hill getting ample opportunity is always going to succeed. 10 targets, 6 catches, 53 yards, and a touchdown. He always is getting work on the ground, can have a rushing touchdown at any given moment down on the goal line. It's always a possibility. The Falcons, they haven't been able to stop anybody. I mentioned it earlier. The Buccaneers, 3 wide receivers combined for 15 catches, 239 yards, and 2 touchdowns just this past weekend. Michael Thomas, 2 out of the last 3 weeks that he played against them, had 9 catches, 104 yards, 9 catches, 105 yards. We've seen Keenan Allen, 9 catches, 52 and a touchdown against them. It's unbelievable, and it should be easy to go. A stat that I wanted to mention before we move on from Tyreek Hill, he has 17 touchdowns this season. He could very easily surpass 20 touchdowns. I haven't seen that from a wide receiver in maybe ever. Honestly, I don't remember the last time it happened. I could have looked it up, but I truly don't remember the last time the wide receivers had 20 touchdowns. But the reason I'm bringing this up is mainly because last season we only had 2 wide receivers in the National Football League that had over 10 touchdowns. That was Kenny Golladay and Cooper Kupp. This season already we have 7 wide receivers that have already passed 10 touchdowns. So it's unbelievable the amount of increase of opportunity and or productivity we've seen from wide receivers this season. Just record-breaking, to say the very least. This year is definitely going to be studied for the next couple in terms of fantasy productivity. It's insane. Either way, we move on to our number 3, DeAndre Hopkins. Again, we knew DeAndre Hopkins was going to be in this conversation as he's coming off an incredible week. 9 catches, 169 and a touchdown. Are we kidding? He played against the Philadelphia Eagles. They didn't have Darius. Could they stop him? No. No one could stop him. He obviously feasted. Now, the question remains, what is he capable of doing specifically against the San Francisco 49ers defense? Go back to week 1. I mean, this is a performance that DeAndre Hopkins took to the bank. Week 1, 14 catches, 151 yards against the 49ers defense when they were fully healthy and ready to go. Imagine them now. I mean, just in the last couple weeks, we've seen number 1 wide receivers dominate against this secondary. Stefon Diggs, 10 catches, 92 yards. Davante Adams, 10 catches, 173 and a touchdown. Metcalf, 12 catches, 161 and 2 touchdowns. It's just been unbelievable as of late. And I think DeAndre Hopkins certainly is a must play because of the matchup and, of course, his relevant opportunity. We have Calvin Ridley as our number 4. With Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, them scoring on a consistent basis against this Atlanta Falcons defense, I mean, it's obviously going to force Matt Ryan to have to drop back into the pocket and feed the ball to his number 1 wide receiver. With Julio continuing to miss due to the hamstring injury, it has obviously been Calvin Ridley nonstop as of the last couple weeks. In just the last 3 games alone, he has consistently had 3 consecutive 100-yard receiving games. He's coming off of a game in which he had 10 catches for 163 and a touchdown. That's back-to-back weeks with a receiving touchdown. Honestly, you can't ask for anything more. I think Calvin Ridley is a monster. He has really become, we talked about it in the offseason. We projected he's going to be the Chris Godwin of this season, and that's what he's become. He was the number 2 guy that really took over the number 1 spot. Hopefully, as long as he's continuing to get these targets and going in the right direction, he's just going to continue to feast and be a fantastic fantasy prospect for us. Our number 5 for this week is Stefon Diggs. I know he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury. From what we've heard from the Bills organization, it's nothing to be too worried about. With Stephon Gilmore missing this week, obviously with a season-ending injury, and the possibility of Stefon Diggs not really being that banged up, John Brown returning to this offense, even getting more of a threat, and the fact that the New England Patriots can't stop the run, I think the play-action pass is going to be such a vital part of the Buffalo Bills, approach this week against the New England Patriots. Again, they want to beat this division rival. They already beat them earlier this season. Stefon Diggs just is coming off of an incredible game against the Denver Broncos with 11 catches for 147 yards. And that's not the last time. I mean, just thinking about the amount of times he's had over 10 catches, I went and I looked at it and I was like, my goodness, because he's obviously leading the league in receptions. In 4 out of the last 5 games, he has had 10 plus catches. So again, this is a guy that is getting an ample amount of targets and delivering in a full PPR. I mean, he's just a top 3 guy. But as of right now, he's sitting at our number 5 because, again, touchdown upside isn't as high as other wide receivers. The New England Patriots, they still have a good secondary overall without Gilmore. But I still think he's going to dominate against them with Josh Allen just on a heater as of late. We have A.J. Brown as our number 6 overall wide receiver. Again, the Tennessee Titans take on the Green Bay Packers. This should be an exciting matchup. Honestly, this could be a championship game kind of thing. This is a playoff game pretty much. These are 2 teams that want to go ahead and establish themselves as a higher seed, potentially win their division. I know the Tennessee Titans, they're obviously competing with the Indianapolis Colts, who are not too far behind them. They've got to be able to lock it in. And also the Green Bay Packers, they're trying to get that number 1 overall seed and get a bye week. So again, this is going to be a very competitive matchup, to say the very least, between the 2 teams. As of right now, we know what A.J. Brown's capable of. He is a touchdown fiend. He's coming off a week, of course, of another touchdown. These are just every week occurrences. Regardless of how many targets he's getting, he's going to catch himself 4 to 6 receptions a week, and then he's going to accompany that with either 60 to 100 yards and a touchdown. That is just what he's capable of. Playing against the Green Bay Packers, I mean, honestly, as of late, it hasn't really been that tough of a matchup. We had DJ Moore go for 6 catches, 131 just this past week, and Allen Robinson recently 8 catches, 74 and 2 touchdowns. So I really do think there's a possibility that A.J. Brown could have himself a pretty good game, especially if Green Bay is coming out firing on all cylinders. It will force Tannehill to throw the ball more. We have Keenan Allen as our number 7. So again, Keenan Allen, even though he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury himself, the question is going to be, is he healthy? And if so, can he play? Because if he can play, he's starting in my lineup just like I had him last week. Last week, regardless of what was going to happen, I had to personally start Keenan Allen. There was so much, kind of momentum following him into that matchup. Unfortunately, had to leave the game early with the injury kind of flaring up once again. But just talking about the last time he played against the Denver Broncos earlier this season, 9 catches, 67 yards and a touchdown. We know what he's capable of. This is one of the most targeted wide receivers in the National Football League, and he's up there in receptions for a reason. So in a PPR, full PPR, doesn't matter. He is dominated. Stefon Diggs this past week went for 11 for 147 against his Denver Broncos secondary. Cole Beasley in that same contest, 8 catches, 112 yards. Again, they're still missing AJ Boya as he's been suspended for PEDs. And I think, of course, if Keenan Allen's ready, active, he's going to be feasting in this matchup. We have Allen Robinson as our number 8. Now, I know Allen Robinson hasn't been as consistent as we want him to be, but he truly is still a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. I think he's the number 9.5 PPR scoring format. So as it currently stands, even though his touchdown upside hasn't been there, I truly do think the matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguar is where it gets unlocked. And I'll tell you why. Just in the last, I want to say 5 weeks, the Jacksonville Jaguars have been giving up a ton of points to wide receivers. The Ravens wide receiver core even saw Des Bryant score a touchdown this past weekend. We've seen A.J. Brown in weekends past, 7 catches, 112 yards and a touchdown. Justin Jefferson, 9 catches, 121 and a touchdown. While in the same contest, Thielen went for 8 catches, 75 and a touchdown. Jarvis Landry recently, 8 catches, 143 and a touchdown against Jacksonville. Wide receivers will benefit due to the matchup. I know David Montgomery is just feasting, but they're going to throw the ball. They're going to have a lot of success in this matchup. They're going to put up a lot of points, and I do expect Allen Robinson to be associated with that. I know Darnell Mooney's been stealing some touchdowns here and there, but to be honest, I think those are mutually exclusive plays. As long as he's getting red zone and end zone threats, I think Allen Robinson should be a fantastic play this week. We have Justin Jefferson as our number 9. We just mentioned him in the vein that, again, he has been performing out of his mind this season. He's coming off of another 100-yard receiving game against the Chicago Bears. That's the second time he's done that this season alone against one of the better secondaries in the National Football League. So, again, props to him. Now, the thing is, he plays against the New Orleans Saints. You guys hear me say it all the time. I don't trust the New Orleans Saints secondary. I don't think that they're as good as advertised. And even though they sometimes make some plays here and there, they are very susceptible to good wide receiver play. And I think Justin Jefferson is going to bring that with Adam Thielen this week specifically. Now, here's the thing. The Minnesota Vikings playing against the New Orleans Saints, this has been a matchup that over the last couple of years has been a pretty intense rivalry. But the Minnesota Vikings always get the upper hand and always pull out a victory. They've won 3 out of the last 4 contests. And when I went back and I looked at the game logs, I wanted to see how successful the wide receiver position was against New Orleans secondary, which is pretty much identical to what they had a couple of years back. I mean, Stefon Diggs, which is pretty much the role that Justin Jefferson is playing in, had incredible games. 6 catches, 137 and a touchdown. 10 catches, 119 and a touchdown. 7 catches, 93 and 2 touchdowns. 3 incredible games and 3 victories in which, of course, Stefon Diggs was a main focal point in this offense. I think Justin Jefferson slotted perfectly in there, is going to dominate, have himself a big week. I know the New Orleans defense, they gave up their fair points to Tyreek Hill last week. Those are great wide receivers. I think Justin Jefferson has himself a pop-off game this upcoming Friday. We have Brandon Aiyuk as our number 10. Man, Aiyuk has been incredible. And regardless of who's playing at quarterback, I am not even bothered by CJ Beathard taking the starting role because Brandon Aiyuk is the offense as it currently stands. The idea of potentially getting George Kittle back obviously is going to be a great upside for this offense. But ultimately, when I look at this offense and I think about what they're capable of, Brandon Aiyuk unlocks everything. He's coming off of another week in which he had 9 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown on 13 targets. Great opportunity leading to success, of course. Playing against the Arizona Cardinals, this is a division rival, one that they've played multiple times over the last couple of years, and it's been close. Kyler Murray keeps it close in this matchup, and it should be an exciting one between these two teams. But Arizona, as of late, they have been struggling in the secondary. We've seen the Eagles wide receiver core scored 3 touchdowns this past week. Robert Woods went for 10 catches for 85. Tyler Lockett, 9 catches, 67 and 1. I mean, we know Tyler Lockett dominates against Arizona. We wish he could only play him every week. And Diggs recently, 10 catches, 93 and a touchdown. So against Arizona, I think the wide receiver position is going to succeed. I think Brandon Aiyuk, regardless if Patrick Peterson's on him, is going to find himself great production this week. We have Adam Thielen as our number 11. In the same vein in which I talked about Justin Jefferson and his success potentially against New Orleans this week, we have seen Adam Thielen dominate against New Orleans. I mean, just in the last 3 times that he's played against them recently, 9 catches, 157, 7 catches, 103 receiving yards and a touchdown, 7 catches for 129. That's 3 consecutive games against this New Orleans Saints secondary in which he's had over 100 receiving yards. That in itself gives me confidence, even though he's coming off of a performance in which he didn't do much. Yes, he scored a touchdown against the Chicago Bears early in that game, but he only finished with 2 catches for 11 yards. It's not enough for a caliber receiver like Adam Thielen, who we anticipate to do so much throughout the year. As of right now, we'll give him the off week. We expect him to dominate against the New Orleans Saints defense. That's what I expect, and that's why I have him as my number 11. Number 12 is Mike Evans. As of all the wide receivers of this Buccaneers offense, I really do trust Mike Evans the most at this point, considering he has been the most consistent of the group, scoring touchdowns, getting over 100-yard games, coming off of a game in which he had 6 catches for 110, plays against the Detroit Lions. I mentioned it before. The Detroit Lions, just this past week, gave up 5 touchdowns to Ryan Tannehill, 3 through the air, 2 on the ground. And then, of course, the week prior to that, Aaron Rodgers, 3 through the air, 1 on the ground. Turkey Day, we had, Deshaun Watson go for 4 passing touchdowns in that contest. We've seen wide receivers dominate against that defense. I'll just go ahead and start reading them out right now. We had A.J. Brown go for 5 catches, 44 yards and a touchdown, while Corey Davis, 4 catches, 110 yards and a touchdown. Davante Adams, 7 catches, 115 and a touchdown. MVS in that same contest, 6 catches, 85 yards and a touchdown. Will Fuller, 6 catches, 171 and 2. Wide receivers dominate recently against this Detroit Lions secondary. Brady's going to have a big game, and it's obviously going to funnel through the wide receivers beginning and ending potentially with Mike Evans. We have DK Metcalf as our number 13. Now, you may have been wondering, where is DK going to finally be on this list? I have settled with number 13, but again, it could fall down in my eyes as the week progresses. As it currently stands, I trust DK because he is one of these stud wide receivers that has gotten me to the dance, right? The reason why I'm in the championship is because of DK and his contributions to my team. But is it a matter of loyalty, or is it a matter of looking at my team and thinking, if he's not capable of scoring and getting 60 yards and 5 catches, is he really going to be better than some of these other wide receiver options I have that might even be lower ranked on today's list? That's the biggest question in hand. Now, of course, the last time he played against the Los Angeles Rams, he only had 2 catches for 28 yards against Ramsey. But though Ramsey has given up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers this season, just recently, DeAndre Hopkins had himself 8 catches, 52 yards, and a touchdown. Would have been 2 touchdowns, but Ramsey had to pull him down on the 1-yard line because, again, if he caught that, he ran a slant on him. He had to defensive pass interference. Otherwise, he was getting roasted that day. We've seen Mike Evans recently, 5 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown against him, and dominate against Jalen Ramsey. When you get a big athletic wide receiver against Ramsey, that is where he struggles most because he succeeds off of his size and strength and speed. I think Metcalf can certainly dominate against him. It's just a matter of how this offense is going to produce. Because of the lack of productivity out of Russell Wilson this last couple weeks and since the midway point of the season, it's kind of given me less hope for DK. I still believe in him, but I've ranked him at 13 accordingly because, again, it is going to be a tough one, and he's really going to have to score in order to have himself a relevant fantasy week. We have Jarvis Landry as our number 14 wide receiver. I'm excited about Jarvis Landry mainly because, again, the matchup against the New York Jets is one of the best at the wide receiver position. Even though the Los Angeles Rams didn't produce well, we saw, Robert Woods come out, have himself 6 catches, 96 total yards, and a touchdown. DK Metcalf the week prior, 6 catches, 61 and a touchdown, didn't even play in the second half. Henry Ruggs got himself 3 catches, 84 and a touchdown, the buzzer beater touchdown at the end of the game. DeVante Parker, 8 catches, 119. Keenan Allen, 16 catches, 145 and a touchdown. Wide receivers have dominated against the New York Jets, and they will continue to do so. Baker in the last 4 games of the season has thrown, 10 passing touchdowns, 2 minimum in the last 4 games. I think Jarvis Landry, of course, is benefiting from that, coming off of a game of 7 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown. I think he'll absolutely be a fantastic play this week, as he has continued to be over the last month of the season. As this offense has kind of gotten away from those terrible weather games that they got consistently after playing home game after home game after home game, they've really been able to open up the offense and let Baker Mayfield feed Jarvis Landry, the number 1 wide receiver, and find some success there. In terms of fantasy productivity, you can't ask for anything more from Jarvis. We have Marvin Jones Jr. as our number 15. Now, as long as Matthew Stafford's good to go, I think he's still going to be able to produce. In this matchup against Tampa Bay, this is going to be a matchup where, of course, Matthew Stafford's going to be down for majority of this contest. If Tom Brady wants to come out and, try to throw the lead in the beginning of the game, not really have a productive offense, so be it. I think Marvin Jones Jr. in combination with Matthew Stafford could easily put up points. They've done it many times this season. In the absence of Kenny Golladay not being there, Marvin Jones has certainly stepped up as a number 1 wide receiver and been a great play coming off of a week of 10 catches, 112, and a touchdown. Of course, we've seen wide receivers dominate against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Recently, Calvin Ridley, 10 catches, 163, and a touchdown this past week. In the same contest, Gage on their team had himself 5 catches, 68 and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill, we remember 200 yards in a single quarter. He had 269 and 3 in that contest. We've seen Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, both of them combined for 275 receiving yards and a touchdown, and 23 total receptions. I mean, it's insane how much this defense has given up as of late. I think Marvin Jones, honestly, is not a bad play at all, and a fantastic, potential start in the absence of a Kenny Golladay once again, which I'm anticipating, of course. We have Diontae Johnson as our number 16. Now, he's kind of given me more hope off of the performance he just had. Again, Diontae Johnson played majority of the snaps, wasn't limited, got himself over, 10 targets. His average earlier this season was about 12.5. He got to 13 targets this past week, 8 catches, 59 yards, and a touchdown. That is the Diontae Johnson we know and love. And that is the guy that I'm going to trust this upcoming week against the Indianapolis Colts, regardless of what the Colts have done in the secondary this season. It is mainly based off of averages why a lot of people see the Colts as one of the better defenses, because as of late, my goodness, they've given up a lot of points. Let's talk about the Texans. 2 out of the last 3 weeks. The Texans just this past week had themselves a combination between Hansen and Keke Coutee. What was it? 167 and 2 touchdowns. Nelson Aguilar the week prior to that had himself 5 catches, 110 and a touchdown. The Texans, 3 wide receivers, Brandon Cooks, Chad Hansen, and Keke Coutee had 307 yards receiving the contest before. We've seen Davante Adams 7 catches, 106 yards and a touchdown. Even AJ Brown 98 yards and a touchdown against his team. So I think Diontae Johnson in the game that is a absolute must win for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's going to be utilized a lot. He has been working on catching the ball. He'll stay in the lineup, and he'll continue to produce for us. We have Robert Woods as our number 17. My concern with Robert Woods isn't a matter of, hey, the offense just looks like they're struggling. It's a matter of just the matchup. The Seattle Seahawks really have been great against wide receivers. They have not given up a single receiving touchdown to an opposing wide receiver in the last 6 games. That includes the last time that they played against the Rams. Obviously, the Rams had to score 3 rushing touchdowns to win that game. But it's a matter of what can we trust from Jared Goff? Is he going to be able to produce? Is he going to find some success? Sure. Robert Woods this past week had a majority of his productivity in the second half, had a 40-yard run, had himself 56 receiving yards and a touchdown. All in all, he is a fantastic wide receiver, but I've ranked him lower than I typically do because I do not trust the matchup for it to be an automatic success for this team. I think like this division rivalry kind of game with both offenses kind of struggling, missing some pieces here and there, I think this is going to be a lower scoring contest. If Robert Woods is to succeed, it's going to have to be via touchdown, which again lowers his ranking a little bit more because he doesn't have as much of a safe floor. Regardless, I think Robert Woods is still a fantastic player as our number 17 this week. Number 18 is DJ Moore. Who would have thought that DJ Moore could come off the IR and just immediately put up a 6-catch, 113-yard game and just run away with it? I mean, I'm not even close did I anticipate something like that happening. But here's the fact of the matter. He plays against the Washington football team. And a lot of people, they see the Washington football team and they think, oh man, they give up the second fewest points to opposing wide receivers in a half PPR. I'm not too worried about that. Why? Brandon Aiyuk, 10 catches, 119. Diontae Johnson, 8 catches, 71 and a touchdown. We had Amari Cooper go for 6 catches, 112 and a touchdown. Marvin Jones Jr., 96 yards and a touchdown. Wide receivers have dominated against the secondary. DJ Moore will hopefully do so this week. I think there are a lot of mouths to feed in Carolina. With the absence of potentially Christian McCaffrey once again this week, it does open up more receiving chances for these wide receivers, specifically DJ Moore, and therefore that is why I have him as the top-rated Carolina wide receiver, but specifically as our number 18 wide receiver this week. We have Chris Godwin as our number 19. Now, against my better judgment, I put Chris Godwin here because, again, I do trust his stability, but in terms of targets and receptions and receiving yards, he has been awful in the last 2 weeks. He's only had, 6 catches in the last 2 weeks. That is not great, but he does play against the Detroit Lions. It is one of the easier matchups at the wide receiver position. We just mentioned it in relation to Mike Evans. I'll mention it once more. The combination of Corey Davis and, of course, AJ Brown this past week went for 150-plus receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. On top of that, we saw, Davante Adams, 7 catches, 115 and a touchdown. In relation, of course, MVS in that same game had himself 85 receiving yards and a touchdown. Will Fuller, 6 catches, 171 and 2 touchdowns. We've seen wide receivers dominate against the Detroit Lions. I think Chris Godwin certainly can be a guy that disappears via targets, but also could end up having himself 10-plus targets and getting himself 8 receptions. That's very close of a possibility. It's just a matter of how the game plan is going to be proceeded. I think it's a matter of just them blowing them out, and I think all these wide receivers feast regardless. He is my number 19. We have our number 20, Corey Davis. We mentioned Corey Davis just a moment ago because, again, he just had a fantastic week. Coming off of a game of 4 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown. To be honest, it was all kind of anticipated. In that matchup, it's not really a tough task at hand. Derrick Henry was going to dominate, and the play action just opened up itself so easily. So the question remains, where can we trust Corey Davis as of right now? He has had some volatile production. He comes off a 27-point week into a 3-point week into a 19-point week in half PPR fantasy. Playing against the Green Bay Packers this week, again, it's just a matter of what exactly are we going to see from this offense. If Derrick Henry comes out and dominates early, then of course he's going to continue to just dictate the game late in the second half. But if Aaron Rodgers, like we anticipate, comes out and scores consistently and is able to get his offense moving down the field, it'll force Tannehill to pass the ball. The defense will be ensuring themselves with double covering AJ Brown, leaving Corey Davis with more opportunities, more potential. And I think Corey Davis can certainly have himself a fantastic fantasy week here as our number 20. Moving on to our number 21, we have Amari Cooper, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. So here's the thing. A lot of you guys are a little sickened by the performance that Amari Cooper put up this past week. And I don't blame you. To be honest, he didn't have a great game. And, Ceedee Lamb did end up producing. Michael Gallup scored a touchdown. And that being the case, let's not forget Amari Cooper the 3 prior weeks was getting himself 4 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown minimum in those 3 games. So again, he could easily get back to that as they play against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I know many of you will maybe be thinking, Darius Slay in the last couple years has dominated and shut down Amari Cooper multiple times, but Darius Slay did not play last week. Darius Slay could potentially miss this upcoming week, giving Amari Cooper even that much more of a viable potential to start and be a productive wide receiver this week. Just talking about some of the number 1 wide receivers that have dominated. I mean dominated against Philadelphia's defense. D-Hop, 9 catches, 169 and a touchdown. Adams, 10 catches, 121, 2 touchdowns. Metcalf, 10 catches, 177 and dropped a touchdown. Either way, number 1 wide receivers dominate against the secondary. If Darius Slay is out, I am 100% firing up Amari Cooper in my championship game, and I'm letting him carry me this week. We move on to AB as our number 22. Again, Antonio Brown had a little bit of a come-out party this past weekend. Really, at least at this point, established himself as a relevant wide receiver because he had not scored a touchdown prior to this past Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. And my goodness, was it exciting to see him at least get back on the board and finally find a little bit more confidence, and him and Brady find more of a connection. 5 catches on 7 targets, 93 yards and a touchdown. Obviously had that big 30-plus yard reception for a touchdown. Plays against the Detroit Lions. We've mentioned it multiple times already in this video. I don't want to continue to repeat myself. You can go listen to the Chris Godwin / Mike Evans scenario. The whole thing is, this entire offense is going to dominate. This defense has given up 4+ touchdowns 3 out of the last 4 weeks to opposing quarterbacks. In my opinion, this is just a matter of how much success are they going to have. Can they all score a touchdown? Can they all get over 5 catches? To be honest, I think the answer is yes to both. And therefore, there is a reason why I have all 3 of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers in the top 22 wide receiver rankings this week. We have Terry McLaurin as our number 23. As it currently stands, yesterday we were a little bit unsure of who the starting quarterback of the Washington football team was going to be. This week, or as of right now, today, I think it's going to be Dwayne Haskins. Even though he was caught at the strip club, he's been in close contact with, all these, COVID stuff. As of right now, it seems like he's probably going to start. And honestly, I'll take that because he knows how to feed Terry McLaurin the ball. He got him 12 targets. Terry McLaurin had 7 catches for 77 yards. I'll take it. I'll take it any day of the week. So even though it is a Carolina matchup, which is a little tough, I'm not too worried about it. As long as Dwayne Haskins is the starting quarterback with, Alex Smith out, as long as they don't have to go to a 4th string guy, as long as they don't have to go and sign somebody off of somebody's practice squad, I'm perfectly fine with it because it at least still gives Terry McLaurin value that you can potentially act upon while playing him. We have Russell Gage as our number 24. I mean, to be honest, I'm playing Russell Gage at this point because he is getting unbelievable targets. In the last couple of weeks, he is just getting more and more targets. He's coming off of a 10-target, 5-catch game, 68 yards and a touchdown. That's 3 consecutive weeks of a touchdown. He's averaging 14.9 fantasy points and a half PPR in just the last 3 weeks alone. Could we ask for more from Russell Gage? Julio is potentially going to probably miss this week. They play against Kansas City. Will be a higher scoring event in which the Falcons have to go ahead and compete, score late in the game, and I think the garbage time can certainly help Russell Gage throughout the contest and end up setting himself up for a lot of success. There's a reason why we mentioned him as a waiver wire pickup for the last couple weeks. He's just been on fire. We have Cole Beasley as our number 25, and even though Cole Beasley deserves to be far higher, I really do think so. I really dabbled around him, putting him maybe at like the number 21 spot, but my only concern here, as of late, is the New England Patriots matchup. The last time that Cole Beasley played against them, he didn't do well. He had 2 catches, but this is a different Cole Beasley as of late. In 4 out of the last 5 games, he has had over 10 targets. In 3 of those 5 contests, he had over 100 receiving yards, and in one of them, he had a touchdown. So, again, he has been unbelievable in the last couple of weeks, coming off of a contest against the Denver Broncos specifically, in which he had over, 10 targets, 8 catches, 112 receiving yards. I can't ask for anything more. If Cole Beasley is going to continue to be a monster, then I'm going to have to start him because there's no reason for me to leave him on my bench and continue to watch him rack up 15 points from the sidelines. I'm getting him in my lineup this week. He's my number 25. We have T.Y. Hilton as our number 26. How the mighty have fallen. To be honest, I'm not that afraid of T.Y. Hilton. I honestly would start him this week as my number 3 wide receiver on a team. And that's probably what I'm going to do in multiple leagues, this week specifically. But here's the thing that I wanted to mention first and foremost. Even though he didn't have the incredible game, he didn't score the touchdown. He had 4 catches for 71 yards. And a lot of people probably didn't watch that game. But he caught a 40-yard touchdown that literally he got hawked on the 3-yard line. If he just steps over that dude, he scores very easily. He ends up having himself a 15-point fantasy week, and we continue to have him in the top 15. But the fact is, Zach Pascal came in and was dominant. I mean, unbelievable. 2 receiving touchdowns. Kind of gives me a little bit of hesitation because we know Phillip Rivers likes to continue to go with the hot hand, continues to look in that direction. Now that he has more confidence with Zach Pascal at the wide receiver position, it might hurt him. But to be honest, they play against Pittsburgh. Their biggest weakness, the secondary. Diggs, 10 catches, 130 and a touchdown. Hollywood Brown, 4 catches, 85 yards and a touchdown. There are many wide receivers in the last couple weeks that have scored against this Pittsburgh secondary. And to be honest, I think their defense, even though they have looked better as of late, man, they are in a bit of a struggle. And if, in fact, this hot Indianapolis Colts team can come in and just take advantage of it, it really could be a great game for T.Y. Hilton. We have Keke Coutee as our number 27. Again, another wide receiver that has been just unbelievably consistent since the suspension of Will Fuller. Keke Coutee has given us 2 games of a touchdown and 1 game of over 100 receiving yards. We will take that to the bank, and he will start into our lineups playing against the Cincinnati Bengals, which, of course, Diontae Johnson, 8 catches, 59 and a touchdown. Amari Cooper, 4 catches, 51 and a touchdown. Wide receivers have produced against them. He's getting a good ample amount of targets, scoring touchdowns, getting good yardage. In a full PPR, probably more of a safe play. But as of right now, with the amount of opportunity he's getting, the lack of usage of a Brandon Cook specifically, Keke Coutee seems to be a fantastic play going forward. Moving on to our number 28 wide receiver, we have Tyler Lockett. And to be honest, Tyler Lockett is just, he scares me. We know that. He hasn't produced well in a very long time because he hasn't scored a touchdown since that Arizona matchup. So he's coming off of a game in which he had 4 catches, 34 receiving yards, 5.4 fantasy points. Is it a great contest? Absolutely not. But the question is, what is Lockett capable of doing against the Rams? If this team is going to try to beat the Rams and claim the division title, they have to score a lot of points. And that is going to be through the air with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson throwing the interception each of the last 3 weeks. He hasn't produced against them very well in the past. In the last 2 games, Russell Wilson threw 2 interceptions against the Rams earlier this season. Again, it's been tough. Lockett hasn't been able to produce because of the lack of production out of Russell Wilson. And to be honest, as it currently stands, I'm a little bit gun shy on 100% starting Tyler Lockett. Regardless, I think he is a better play than a lot of other guys because of the upside that he presents. But if you're looking for a safe floor, I'm not sure if that's the guy for this week. But in terms of upside, he's always got the ability to score 2 touchdowns on any given moment. We have Rashard Higgins as our number 29. So the fact that you play against the New York Jets, beautiful. The fact that you've gotten so many opportunities in the last couple weeks and had consistent productive weeks, even though Bradbury didn't start this last week against them for the New York Giants. We still saw some pretty good productivity out of Rashard Higgins. Obviously, I wanted more than just 4 catches, 67 yards. But in the 2 games prior to this past week, he had himself receiving touchdowns, over 10 targets, over 70 receiving yards, a boatload of catches. Playing against the Jets, the Jets, 96 total yards to Robert Woods and a touchdown. Metcalf, 61 yards and a touchdown. Parker, 119. Allen, 145 and a touchdown. It's free. It really is free. It's free real estate. And I think Rashard Higgins, Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, they all act upon it this week. Our number 30 wide receiver is Marquise Hollywood Brown. And speaking of James Bradbury in relation to not playing against Rashard Higgins this past week, he might be able to shoot up against Marquise Brown this week. If that's the case, we're moving Marquise Brown down. He's going back into the 31 to 36 range. As it currently stands, if James Bradbury is once again going to miss, then I'll continue to rely upon Marquise Brown to put up great performances. Again, he has had 10 plus fantasy points in each of the last 4 weeks. He has scored multiple touchdowns. He is getting himself great opportunities. 6 catches, 98 yards against the Jacksonville Jaguars this past week. As long as he is getting this kind of ample opportunity and the number 1 corner coverage against him isn't too overbearing, I'm perfectly fine firing up Marquise Brown this upcoming week as our number 30. We move on to our number 31, Cooper Kupp. Again, Cooper Kupp has fallen out of favor for me. Even though many of you know Cooper Kupp is one of my favorite wide receivers, as I am a Rams fan, the fact of the matter is that he is just unbelievably unbearable at this point. He just cannot get it done. Jared Goff is not looking in his direction. His offense is run-first mentality, and really just, they can't produce. There isn't the big playability. They don't have it. They are just meandering down the field, and Cooper Kupp hasn't been able to score touchdowns. You play against a team that hasn't given up a receiving touchdown to a wide receiver in the last 6 games, including the last time that they played against the Rams. I think Cooper Kupp, though he is a viable option to potentially break out this week, because he always has these breakout games after having multiple poor performances, I just think it's not worth it in a championship game to risk it. Speaking of risking it, Juju Smith-Schuster is coming off of an awful week, but luckily for him, he plays against the Indianapolis Colts. We talked about it in relation to Diontae Johnson and his capabilities this week. The Texans dominated in the passing game against the Indianapolis Colts in 2 out of the last 3 weeks. Nelson Aguilar, 5 catches, 110 yards and a touchdown. Of course, just this past week, the Texans had 2 receiving touchdowns and 167 yards between Keke Coutee and Chad Hansen. The game prior to that, the 3 wide receivers starting, Cooks, Hansen, and Coutee, had 307 receiving yards. We've seen wide receivers dominate against that secondary recently, and I do think that Juju Smith-Schuster, as long as he stops dancing on the logo, could have a pretty good week here. We have Robby Anderson as our number 33 wide receiver. So, even though I think Robby Anderson is a little bit of a sketchy play, in comparison to a lot of the other wide receivers, he does get ample opportunity, even though this last week was a bit of just a disappointment to say the very least. I don't know how else to describe it. I think he can get a little bit of a bounce back week against Washington. I know the Washington football team, though a lot of teams look at them and think, oh man, there's some of the tougher defenses. I've mentioned it before. They give up a lot of points as of late. Brandon Aiyuk, 10 catches, 119. Diontae Johnson, 8 catches, 71 and a touchdown. Amari Cooper, 6 catches, 112 and a touchdown. Marvin Jones Jr., 96 yards and a touchdown. They've given up a lot of points. Robby Anderson could have himself a little bit of a bounce back week here for our number 33 wide receiver. We have Ceedee Lamb as our 34. Again, Ceedee Lamb was anticipated to succeed because, like I mentioned last week, the 49ers slot wide receiver is awful. He's terrible. He's a joke. Does that bode well for Larry Fitzgerald this week? Great. But that's not the point. The point is, how can Ceedee Lamb produce against the Philadelphia Eagles secondary this week, coming off of a 5-catch, 85-yard game? I think the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles defense is beat up, injured, and that this secondary can't stop a soul just leads me to believe that Ceedee Lamb will continue to be utilized in this offense and find himself some success this week. As our number 34, I know Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper will certainly be getting touches, but to be honest, I think Ceedee Lamb is in line for a pretty good week this week in comparison to those 2 guys. So we have Emmanuel Sanders as our number 35 playing on Friday. Friday night NFL football. I mean, I'd love to have football every night of the week, but the whole thing is, can Emmanuel Sanders produce this week in the matchup that, again, they do give up a fair amount of points to opposing wide receivers. They've given up a fair amount of good performances recently to opposing wide receivers. The question is Emmanuel Sanders, he himself, capable of it? With Traquan Smith potentially missing, them not having as many receiving options with Michael Thomas gone, I think he fits into a pretty good role, gets himself an ample amount of targets, and could potentially get himself upwards of 10 catches. I think that's a chance that I'm willing to take with Emmanuel Sanders this week. We have DeVante Parker as our last receiving option. Guys that, again, have high upside, but my goodness, their floors are a little bit sketchy. That is why they sit down here. DeVante Parker is our number 36 because the Las Vegas Raiders defense cannot stop a soul. And that being the case, it still is apparent to me that he is still a little bit injured. If he is not fully practicing by Thursday and Friday, I don't want any business with him. But if he can get full practices in, there is no Mike Gesicki in the lineup. There is no Jakeem Grant. They're going to have a hard time being able to at least find any other receiving options. DeVante Parker could potentially succeed based on the circumstance. But with that being said, there are a lot of contingencies that may want to go through. We'll talk about it as the week progresses. But for right now, the soft 36 is DeVante Parker. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure you click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate you guys supporting the channel. That is the end of today's video. I appreciate it so much. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about quarterbacks and tight ends as we get into Thursday. Of course, there's no game tomorrow, but hopefully you guys can check out the rankings and get it ready to go. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.